Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Keeping It Behavioral, where we're empowering parents one episode at a time and breaking down behavior analytic topics to what they look like in the real world. My name is Ray Trank, and I'm joined by my beautiful co host.
Justine Cardoza.
And today we're going to be talking about a very important topic, which I say that about every topic, but this one, I think, especially with the rise of technology, is extra important, and that is navigating information overload. We're going to be talking about where the flood of autism information is coming from, why it can be confusing and even harmful, and how to evaluate and navigate all the information that you're being fed constantly with more confidence. So, Justine, if you want to kick us off, maybe explain a little bit about why there's so much of that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the why of why there's such a raise in information about autism. What autism looks like, what's causing it, what the symptoms are presenting like. There's such a wide range of things that are talked about in the autism community and outside of the people who are in the community. And it's important to kind of divulge and talk through and be able to navigate and discern what information is truthful and good to use and what could be harmful, because something that we're noticing now is that there is a rise in the rates of diagnoses that are occurring. There is also a spotlight on how, studies and research about autism has been completed and what is missing from that research. A lot of that tends to be cultural things. There's been a small subset of a demographic of people that autism awareness has been researched about to be able to create that information, but we're missing tons of different diverse individuals within the autism community that are not being represented with that. Within that rise of diagnoses, there's a rise of people spending the time to learn more about it, to do the research, and then also those people who are now exposed to it, feeling and believing that, if you're exposed to one person on the spectrum, you know so much about it, which we've all learned is not the case, right? It is a spectrum, meaning everyone on the spectrum is different. Autism presents itself in different ways across all the individuals who fall within that spectrum. So it's really important to make sure that we are not basing this information that we're receiving or sharing off of one experience with one person on the spectrum. I also think that, more access to technology being on the forefront of how people are now receiving information and sharing it. It gives the microphone to anybody, right? So we're getting resources and information from people who might not be professionals in that realm or might not be qualified to give that information. So also paying attention to the perspective of the person or the perspective of the information that you're taking in to know whether this is a credible source or not. And there's a lot of contradictions within like what is understood about autism in a professional realm versus what it looks like in a personal realm. How when you interact with your brother or your cousin or your sister or your mom who might be on the spectrum, and how that information in your personal experience differs from what you're reading online and what you're hearing online of other people's experiences, especially within the personal versus professional realm. So there's a lot of things, a lot of variables that as BCBAs we always have to consider when we're receiving information that we'd like to just share with you guys to be able to have the skills to know how to navigate everything that's being thrown at you.
Absolutely. And I feel like you hit on some really important points here because we see this not just being the case within the discussion of autism. It's oftentimes impacting areas like the medical field in general. Like you're sick, and the first thing you do is you go on Dr. Google to figure out what your symptoms mean. And I think you're bringing up such an important point that when you are taking the time to sort through where your information is coming from, who's giving it, it allows you to have a more well-rounded perspective on the information that you're receiving. So I think that's really awesome points. And kind of piggybacking off of that, so there's so much information, there's so much going on, and this does have an impact on the people that are consuming it, especially those who are in roles where they are maybe trying to support learners or support individuals who are recently diagnosed. Maybe they're recently diagnosed themselves and they're navigating that journey. So it can be very confusing. You're receiving a lot of conflicting information. It's the same thing with any medical opinions that you're receiving online. You're confused. You don't know which source you should be trusting. Where is the information going to be valuable and things that you should actually start making adjustments, in your daily life, or resources that you should be pursuing versus those that are just background noise that could actually maybe cause harm.
Yeah.
You might even be feeling anxiety or guilt because you feel this pressure to do things the same way somebody else did in their own experience. And I think, Justine brought up this point when she was, giving us a little bit of an introduction where when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Every person's experience is their own. It is completely unique. And that should never be something that is shamed or looked down on. But with the rise in information and the rise of accessibility, we see that being the case. Sometimes also we're experiencing that overload from trying to research everything. You're taking in too
Yeah.
much where it's hard to break down actionable steps. Where do I even start? And you might also be losing trust in professionals or even, ignoring other advocates' voices who are living that experience. And I think, again, that goes back to that point about taking in information, but using it to cultivate a well-rounded opinion.
Yep.
And when you do your own research, that's where you then lean into consulting with professionals about your own unique journey, your own unique experiences, which can relate to, your loved one as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that, I mean, I know I feel this all the time, not even just in our field, but in daily life, is choice paralysis.
Hmm.
When you are presented with so much information, sometimes you are just so overwhelmed, you don't know what to do. You're being tossed with information like, oh, if I change this diet, I might see a change. If I go do this, stem cell treatment, that's a big
Yeah.
one right now. Weighted vests, all sorts of things. Everyone has different quick fixes
Yeah.
or things that you should adjust. And I think something we really want to hone in with this podcast today, this topic is take your time, slow down. There's no rush. Take information in, do research, listen to the voice of those who experience it, but take every experience with a grain of salt and recognize that that is their experience. That doesn't mean that things might not work for you, but it does mean that it might not be the exact same experience because you're not the same person. So that's definitely a big thing I want to urge people who are listening. Please, please take your time.
Yeah, and I love how you pointed out that like it might not work for you because that's something that we experience in the professional realm when dealing with, people who are on the spectrum is that even though we have our tried and true strategies that we use in the field of ABA, it doesn't always work for every kid. We've talked recently in one of the past podcasts about PDA and how those tried and true methods don't work
Mhm.
for kids that fall within that profile sometimes, right? Like it might work, it might not. It's a toss up because every child and every person on the spectrum is different. So I love how you made that distinction and called that out because it's important to know. So I think kind of and then in response to what you said also about an action step, right? Like with this information, what am I doing next? We wanted to give you guys some information about the types of sources that you may come across, how to discern them, what type of things to question when you're getting information from those sources to then again back to Ray's point, make that well-rounded decision and know what when it is a decision that you're making, to know what kind of strategies to use or what type of way to adjust your life after getting all the facts and knowing how to navigate all that information. So one of the ways that you can get information about how to support those on the spectrum is through research studies. So something like that to really take into consideration is like, are they current? Because even in the field of ABA, it's ever changing. If the research proves that something that used to work in the past is not working, baby, that is not a strategy that we should be using anymore because the research has shown it. The society that we live in today, the social norms and things that are common today are not what they were back 20
Yes,
years ago, back
good
50
call
years
out.
ago.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, with ABA being a field that, started a little bit later than some other ones, I believe in the 60s and 70s is when we really start to focus in on research, that it's important to make sure that things that we are researching are current because another thing that has changed a lot is our ethics. So just making sure that the research that you're taking in is ethical, who funded them, right? Because what type of message may they trying to be communicating with the data from their research and what is the tone of that research? And then making sure that the findings are not being too oversimplified in the media, and making sure that you're taking the time to really, and if even if you're reading it and you're like, I don't exactly understand what this means, contact resources to support you with understanding how that research is being communicated.
Yeah.
Another one is medical. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I want to interject real quick because I really love that last point that you just made because I think that the thing that can be really intimidating for families or for people that are recently diagnosed navigating the journey is there is a lot of literature out there, but being able to dissect that and
Mhm.
disseminate it and understand it, it's not in layman's terms where it's easily digestible to an average person. So something I also hope that people leave this podcast with is feeling empowered to ask questions to better understand because we're not all researchers, you
Yep.
know, with controlled studies writing all of these empirical, articles. And so it's okay to lean into people in your support network who are qualified professionals who their job for a living is to stay up to date on this research and ask those questions. You're not expected to understand everything right away, and there's nothing wrong with asking those questions.
Absolutely. I love that call out. And another great resource of people to ask questions to would be medical and professional, providers. So, finding a space, not just for those who might work directly with those on the spectrum that you might know, but even resources like, um, communities and businesses that are made to specifically support those on the spectrum. Because a lot of times they'll do the heavy work of doing the research and then they'll be like, here's what we have found from listening to all of this research and taking in all this research that's been done. And so it makes it a little bit more digestible and understandable, like Ray was mentioning, for you to be able to understand and receive that information and making sure do they center themselves in the perspective as best they can of someone who might be on the spectrum, the way that they will speak about those on the spectrum and the way that they will navigate a conversation about needs is a really good teller of, okay, this is someone I can trust versus maybe they don't have a good grasp on that type of perspective. And then are they using things that are up to date? Kind of like what I mentioned with the research. Like, have they done their due diligence in making sure that whatever strategies they're using are still valid in what we are using today as professionals? Another great source would be self-advocates for those that are on the spectrum. Who else is a better resource than someone who can give you firsthand account of what these things feels like, what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes, because it's so important to have that perspective as well. So knowing that there's valuable insights that can come from those lived experiences and being able to say, hey, this resource was one that I utilized. It didn't really work for me, and this is why. So that way, if, hey, I know someone who has given me similar feedback, I think this might not be the route to go. Maybe I should try something else. So just being able to build a better perspective and more empathy for those who are on the spectrum.
And the
Um,
ethics, like you
yeah,
mentioned earlier, like this ties in beautifully when you're looking to autistic individuals, you're going to know what also is ethical, right? Because
yeah,
there's so many things that we might not think are problematic because we're not the ones living the experience. And so hearing those advocates and those who have that lived experience saying, "Hey, that made me deeply uncomfortable," or,
yeah.
"I found that to be really just traumatizing for me. That was very unpleasant." I mean, we learn how to better shape our interventions and supports just based off of learning and being open to that learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that call out. And then another source that I briefly touched on too was the social media influencers, so just making sure that if that is a source that you want to follow along and really utilize some of the strategies that they're offering, that they're qualified or experienced, making sure that if a parent is talking about what their experience was like with their kid, that they're not trying to offer medical advice, and then the same realm of if there's a provider that's offering their experiences, that they're not offering something that, as we would say, outside of their scope of practice. As a BCBA, I'm not going to give you medical advice about how to treat having a headache or how to treat these different things because that's not in my scope of practice.
Mhm.
And then making sure that what you're consuming is not clickbait and sensationalization, it's sensationalism, So we're not just making this post about supporting those on the spectrum and then not really diving deep into what's important about actually supporting them or using any type of strategies that have been proven to be successful. So just making sure you're doing your due diligence and making sure that it's not something that's being sold to you versus trying to offer education, because those who are really advocating for people on the spectrum are offering education. And if it's something they're selling, it should be in relation to access to more education, not just, hey, this is a really great product, you should buy it, So making sure that you are kind of assessing those variables when you're taking in all these information from all these different sources.
Yes. And with that clickbait, big thing, there is no quick fix for anything.
Mhm.
There really isn't. Most of the things in our life that need to be changed or need support or need resources, anything in your life, mental health, fitness, anything, it all takes time. And it takes consistency and consistent access to, behavior change and different environments. So beware of clickbait that says there are cures for everything because that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess kind of piggybacking off of all of that, there are a few grounding questions we've put together where Our hope is that it will help everyone to slow down, really process through the information that they're receiving. And the first one is, does this information support my child's well-being or just my anxiety? I think whenever we're navigating mental health, whenever we're navigating, intellectual differences in really any capacity, there's a lot of fear mongering going around where
Yeah.
um, companies, especially with the clickbait and the products, are really trying to take advantage of the fact that there's a lot of vulnerability and confusion and stress and anxiety related to navigating a diagnosis. So, really being able to parse through that information and say, what is actually the driving force for me when I'm consuming this product or I'm consuming this information? Which leads into the next question: who is benefiting from this message? Is it my child or is it a business model? That's a really powerful question to ask
Yeah.
yourself when you're navigating anything on social media or any of the information you're going to be taking in, which also leads into our other question. Is it based on fear or empowerment? Are we lifting up individuals? Are we trying to change them? Because a big thing that we focus on ABA and all providers really should be is ensuring that we are leaning into autism acceptance, autism celebration,
Yeah.
not trying to change a person. We're trying to create supports to help everyone live a happy, healthy, fulfilled life. That is our ultimate goal with everything that we do. And the things that you're consuming as supports should align with that. Um, and it goes into our last thing. Do autistic individuals agree with this perspective? This has been a theme we've been tying into pretty much every bit of this conversation is
Yeah.
listen to that. The voices of those who are experiencing this when they tell you what they want, when they tell you what they don't like. Listen, and it matters. It's powerful. And if you're especially someone on the outside trying to be a support to someone navigating this journey, really consider that perspective when
Yeah.
you're trying to figure out ways that you can be a good support and you can navigate all the information that you're taking in. So some practical tips that can be utilized after you kind of asked yourself those grounding questions is creating an information filter. So this might mean it can be a literal filter that you put on different social media platforms if you want, but also it can just be a mental filter you have where you're thinking, all right, this isn't coming from a trusted professional, or this isn't coming from an advocate or someone who has this lived experience. I don't think I want to consume this. I don't think I want to carry this in my mental space.
Yeah.
Also, limiting time that you're spending researching online. Sometimes you need to step away and have clarity before you dive back into taking in more information. Of course, you want to support. It comes from a loving place where you want to be the most informed possible. But leaning into that conversation we had earlier with information overload, it's a very real thing. So take some time away when you need it, but also keep a journal. Keep track of the things that you are noticing are helping your child. Or if you're someone who's recently diagnosed, something that's helping you navigate the world around you, not just what you're seeing online is trending or working for someone or some company who's trying to sell you something. Talk to other parents, lean into community, and don't treat those online forums as medical advice. So definitely consume them as a support network, in the sense of having people you can lean on who understand your experience. But
Yeah.
we always recommend please seek out medical supports, please seek out ABA providers, anyone that you think can help improve the quality of life of yourself, your child, any other loved one that's navigating this journey, and use some of those free resources that are out there. There's a lot of resources in libraries. You have educators who have, like Justine was mentioning, resources to help you just really focus in on a particular topic or skill that you're really trying to help cultivate. And you can do that in a way where you're just focusing on one step at a time, not trying to solve every problem in one go.
Yeah.
So I guess I can start off with one of our big closing thoughts, and that is, I know we are kind of like a broken record with this, but it really is important, is that autism is not a one size fits all experience, and neither is the advice you're going to receive.
Yeah.
Take everything in with a critical eye. There's a lot that you're going to be flooded with. There's going to be a lot of information and a lot of pressure that comes with it. Take away, from those trusted professionals, take away, some things you want to put in your journal. Really take a breather and be critical with the information you're taking in because it is important.
Absolutely. The flood of information can definitely feel like a lot of pressure, especially if your algorithm is just shooting you all that information constantly across social medias, across types of posts. So just make sure that you give yourself the grace to feel like you don't have to be consuming it all. You know, if there's something that's consistently popping up, close it, look at something else, try to find other things to incorporate into your algorithm so that way it's not just those topics. Because I know that our FBI agent and our phones are definitely listening and making sure that they're on top of all the things that we're talking about. But give yourself that grace because this is not, like Ray mentioned, this is not a we're going to solve this problem today or fix this issue today or in 1 hour. It's a lifelong learning experience to be able to support the unique needs of your child or the person that you are interacting with on the spectrum. So don't just listen to the loudest voice in the room and say, oh my gosh, this is what that one person said. This must be it. Give yourself that time to not be divulging into researching. And when you are looking into information or taking in that content, that you can, pick up on those patterns of similar things that you're hearing across the different providers or across the different videos that you're contacting. And take the time to pause, question yourself on how you feel about what you're consuming, question how the people that are presenting that information are doing so. And then when you feel like you're back at a space that you are grounded and you feel like you're receptive to all this information that the world has to offer, and make that, discernible with that eye to make sure that you're in a space to take that in and to put in that effort. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad we were able to touch base on something that I'm sure is consuming all of us with the information overload, not just about this topic, but about everything, because that is the world that we're living in right now. But we are keeping it behavioral, guiding autism and fostering hope. We're here for you every other week with a new episode. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Keeping It Behavioral, and check out our website at google.view.keepingitbehavioral. We are behavior analysts, but we are not giving individualized advice or treatment guidance. We're just creating a community to discuss these topics and serve those that we love. I'm Justine Cardoza.
And I'm Ray Trank, and thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.